Today's episode is brought to you by Forvis Mazars.
SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. COVID reshaped the hospitality sector in many ways, but you probably haven't heard about one positive impact. To survive, the crisis forced the industry to unite, leading to the creation of the Australian Restaurant and Café Association. It's one of Australia's newest peak bodies, representing over 360,000 businesses. CEO Wes Lambert has overseen the formation of the association from the beginning of COVID to now. It's a terrific story that Wes tells to Jeff Waters.
We formed the Australian Restaurant and Café Association on the 31st of May with our first board meeting. We brought together captains and captainesses of industry that run and own some of the largest and most well-known restaurant groups throughout Australia to be a stronger voice for the restaurant and cafe segment of the accommodation and food service industry to local, state and federal governments.
So why? What brought this about?
Oh, look, ultimately, the industry felt underrepresented. So for the past few years, many legislative and policy changes have been enacted both on a state and federal level that weren't so good for the accommodation and food service industry, including on a state level from a payroll tax and Retail Leases Act point of view, and on a federal level from some of the Fair Work and awards changes, and as well as some excise and other legislative instruments.
So you're a peak industry group looking after your industry, but do you cater for smaller, perhaps single restaurant owners as well?
Oh, absolutely. There are 54,285 restaurants and cafes throughout Australia.
Specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always going to have the numbers. I'm a numbers guy. There are 54,285, and about 93% of those are considered to be small business, single mom and pop locations. So ultimately, you cannot advocate for one group or one restaurant without advocating for them all.
So what will you be doing to represent those small restaurants?
Oh, that's a great question. So I am in Canberra for every parliamentary sitting week, and usually I have 10 to 20 meetings with parliamentarians in Canberra. And we also meet in each state and territory with the government and the opposition in order to basically ensure that legislation and promised legislation is fit for purpose for restaurants and cafes.
And how are you finding the response from government, considering you're so new?
Oh, look, ultimately, I was previously in a role where I was a lobbyist and advocate for the sector. And so what I've found is that the government has embraced ARCA and embraced us representing the segment.
So what is at the pointy end of the lobbying right now, at the moment?
Oh, look, at the pointy end of lobbying at the moment in fiscal 25 is migration and changes to the CSOL list, as well as international students and working holidaymakers. There's been some restrictions put in place that are absolutely creating continued workforce shortages. Recently, the ACTU has come out saying that they're going to go after junior wages. That's the 70, 80, and 90% that we pay to 18, 19, and 20-year-olds working in hospitality businesses, as well as retail, aged care, and other foundation industries. They would like that businesses would pay those juniors as adults, which is a huge deal. That could add multiple percentages of wage costs to an already low profit margin segment of the industry, and as well as other tax changes like FBT and GST, and certainly the RBA and the ACCC have also opened an inquiry into credit card surcharging, which has become a bugbear for the industry.
So very many issues there that need to be addressed, and what we're going to do for the listeners is come back eventually and speak about each of those or interview you about those individually. But is there a chance that this wage change that the ACTU is chasing will have an effect on other small businesses as well?
Absolutely. The ACTU is running a test case in the Fair Work Commission now, and they're actually going after the retail industry, which includes fast food. And they have stated publicly that if they win or lose, they're going to be going to the government to make some legislative change, and also going after the accommodation and food service industry, which would be the restaurant and hospitality awards.
So obviously the government will have to think long and hard about that because it would have inflationary pressures, which they're trying to avoid. So that may work in the industry's favour. In the meantime, just exploring your new organisation, what's your personal involvement here, Wes? How come you're involved in this?
Throughout COVID, I led Restaurant and Catering Australia, not only to a Association of the Year Awards in late 2020, and myself to an Association Influencer Award from AUSA, but I helped save the hospitality industry through COVID by working directly with both state and federal governments on the policy and legislative settings that allowed hospitality businesses to continue to trade through COVID. And currently, the industry is facing some of the hardest and fiercest headwinds that it has faced in recent times. And they have called upon me to lead another industry association in order to ensure that the voices of those 54,285 restaurants and cafes are heard, both in Canberra and state and territory parliament houses.
Same local team, new global reach. Forvis Mazars, formerly Mazars, is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping you confidently grow your business. Find out how Forvis Mazars can support you at forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.
Well, it sounds like they picked the right person. What are you most proud about with your dealings during the COVID crisis?
Oh, look, the Prime Minister mentioned our organisation right at the beginning of COVID as we put forward one of the first COVID-safe plans that was based upon best practices around the world. And that was adopted, which allowed restaurants and cafes to continue doing takeaway so that they could survive. In New Zealand, restaurants and cafes were forced to close altogether. And then throughout COVID, we were instrumental with the Treasurer at the time, as well as state premiers and treasurers in working on financial programs, including JobSaver and JobKeeper and the state-level grants that were provided to small businesses to keep them floating, to keep their heads above water.
Given those headwinds that you described and the dire situation that the sector finds itself in, do you have any advice that you can offer small restaurant owners?
Oh, look, ultimately, it's super important for you to seek out help if you need help. There are many different sources of both IR and ER help, legal help, accounting help, but also operational help. You know, the hospitality industry in really the past 5 years, that sounds strange to say 5 years since the beginning of COVID, but in the 5 years since the beginning of COVID, the industry has accelerated in the use of technology. And so if you're a cafe, if you don't have a digital coffee card, or you're not using the most up-to-date ordering systems or POS systems, or even credit card terminals, if you haven't streamlined your businesses with time and attendance software and all of the available softwares that are very inexpensive per month, they can create such great efficiencies within your business. From a demand side, it's really important that as a small business that you do engage through social media. Many diners really only learn about and engage with restaurants through social media. So it's super important that you have a social media strategy that then can be the demand side to complement any supply side efficiencies that you pick up.
That's Wes Lambert, CEO of the Australian Restaurant and Café Association. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media And head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Forvis Mazars. To find out more, visit forvismazars.com/au. That's FORVISMAZARS.com/au.